Legal Timeline by Melanie Commisso. Code of Hammurabi. In 1750 BCE. At the time, King Hammurabi was a ruler of Babylonia, which is now Iraq. The Code of Hammurabi was said to be one of the first records of laws written down. King Hammurabi engraved these laws into stone. Many of the laws were based on their strong beliefs of God. The laws in the Code of Hammurabi were grouped under categories. Some of these categories included property, trade, and business. Aside from the strong belief about God, there were also other beliefs in the Code of Hammurabi, which were the strong should not injure the weak. One of the harsh laws in the Code of Hammurabi was the saying, an eye for an eye. As you can see, the punishments were very severe and harsh. The Code of Hammurabi was based off of retribution, which means every crime deserves a punishment. The Code of Hammurabi was written down in stone. Codification is the process of preparing a code. This connects to Canadian law today because now we still believe in retribution. Only then, when committing a crime, the punishments were very harsh. Now, a person who commits a crime receives jail time. Another connection is that Code of Hammurabi had the laws written down, and now in Canadian law, our laws are also written down. Another connection to the Canadian law today is that in the Code of Hammurabi, the laws were organized under categories. And now, laws are also organized under categories. Mosaic Law, 1240 BCE. The influences. God was a heavy influence on the Mosaic Law. It was based off of the 10 Commandments, and it is in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Mosaic Law is very similar to the Code of Hammurabi. The beliefs and values of Mosaic Law were heavily based on God. There is also a strong belief of restitution. Restitution is repaying what is lost. Mosaic Law also believed in very severe punishments. One of the punishments was burning of the human if they committed a crime such as incest. Another severe punishment was to be hung. Mosaic Law connects to Canadian law today through restitution. Restitution still exists today in our Canadian law. People can sue others to repay for what is lost. Today, we also have beliefs of God, which exists in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The quote says, "Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law." Mosaic Law also connects to Canadian law today because back then there were harsh punishments and now we still have punishments but less harsh, which is jail time. The English Bill of Rights in 1689. The English Bill of Rights laid out the basic civil rights of humans. It also limits the powers of the monarch, sets rights of parliaments including freedom of speech, sets rights prohibiting cruel punishment, and it was further accompanied by the Magna Carta and habeas corpus. Inside the Bill of Rights, it said that members of parliament had freedom of speech. The connection to Canadian law today. In Canada, we have a sovereign, which is a queen. In the Bill of Rights, it stated each sovereign of England. We also have the Magna Carta and habeas corpus still existing in our law today. We have civil rights, which refer back to the Canadian Bill of Rights today. We also have just punishments for committing a crime. Napoleonic Code in 1804. This was when Napoleon was a French ruler. The Napoleonic Code had 2,281 articles inside 3 books. The Napoleonic Code forbade privileges based on birth, which means no matter what social class the person was born in, it did not matter or determine their future. It also believed that everybody had freedom of religion. Another thing was that the Napoleonic Code specified that government jobs should go to the most qualified. The connection to Canadian law today is that in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we also have the freedom of religion. Another connection is that we also give jobs to the most qualified. Roman law. In 100 CE. This legal system began in the early Rome and became the basis of law for Western Europe except England. Romans created a profession for the study of legal matters, which is called the lawyer. Roman law had a strong belief of equity. Equity is the idea that laws should be fair and just, so all are equal. An example of equity would be having handicapped parking spaces or having ramps for handicapped people to have easy access to get into buildings. This connects to Canadian law today because now we still have the profession of lawyers. It also connects because equity exists in society today, like the example of the handicap ramps. The Constitution Act, which is called the BNA Act of 1867. Canada was still not fully independent from Britain. In the BNA Act, sections existed which were 91, 92, and 93. These explained the responsibilities of each level of government. For example, the federal government was responsible for military and currency, whereas the provincial government was responsible for healthcare. Section 133 establishes English and French as the official languages of the Parliament of Canada. This connects to Canadian law today because we still have the Constitution and the sections of the Constitution which shows the levels of the government and their powers. Also, in our Constitution, it shows the importance of the Queen. It also shows the role of the Queen in our legal system. We also have the French language as our second language and also used in our Parliament. The Constitution Act of 1982. This also contained the federal, provincial, and municipal government powers, like the BNA Act. It also allowed Canada to amend their own constitution without asking Britain. This is when Canada became independent. The Charter of Rights was also inside the Constitution. The amending formula was 2/3 of the provinces with 50% of the population. Canada finally gained its independence from Britain. Gaining this independence was called patriation. Like I said before, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was inside the Constitution. One of the freedoms was the freedom of religion. The connection to Canadian law today is that now Canada is independent from Britain. We also have the same formula, which is 2/3 of the provinces with 50% of the population. Also, our Constitution remains the same and is very hard to change. Our Constitution still has our sections which state the powers of the governments. September 11, 2001, in New York City, the Twin Towers got attacked by terrorists. The impact. Terrorists attacked New York. 24 Canadians died. After this, Canada created an anti-terrorism law. This law created strict security to restrict terrorists from entering Canada. Government was now allowed to bring a person to prison if they are suspected of terrorism. It also increased airport security and created new rules on airplanes. Border security and port security got very, very strict. It took away the freedoms of terrorists. They had no contact with anybody. They got severe punishment, which was jail time. They lost all of their freedom. The connection to Canada. Anti-terrorism law still exists to this day, from 2001, when the terrorist attacks happened, until now. Severe punishments for these actions are still in place.